The gunshot that shattered the morning stillness wasn't meant for Katherine Preston, but the bullet that tore through the stagecoach window missed her face by less than 3 inches. She pressed herself against the leather seat, her heart hammering against her ribs as the horses screamed and lurched forward in panic. The driver shouted something she couldn't make out over the thunder of hooves and the crack of another shot. Through the dust-hazed window, she glimpsed riders closing in on both sides, their faces obscured by bandanas, their intentions clear as the revolvers in their hands. The stagecoach tilted dangerously as it careened around a bend in the rutted trail. Katherine's carpetbag slid across the floor, spilling its contents. She grabbed for the seat as the coach lurched again, and then came the sickening moment when she felt the wheels leave the ground. Time stretched impossibly thin. She saw the rocky embankment rushing toward them, saw the sky tilt at a wrong angle, and then the world became a chaos of splintering wood and screaming metal. When the motion finally stopped, Katherine found herself half buried in torn fabric and broken luggage, tasting blood and dirt. Her ears rang. Every breath sent a sharp pain through her left side. She couldn't tell if minutes or seconds had passed. Slowly, carefully, she pulled herself free from the wreckage, her hands shaking so badly she could barely grip anything. The stagecoach lay on its side like a dying animal, one wheel still spinning lazily in the New Mexico sun. The driver was nowhere to be seen. Katherine heard hoofbeats approaching and felt terror spike through her pain. She tried to run, but her legs wouldn't cooperate properly. She managed perhaps 10 stumbling steps before a rider appeared over the rise, silhouetted against the brilliant blue sky of that September morning in 1883. "Don't shoot," she heard herself say, the words coming out smaller than she intended. "Please don't shoot me." The rider didn't shoot. Instead, he dismounted in one fluid motion and approached her slowly, hands visible and empty. "Easy now," he said, his voice low and steady. "I'm not going to hurt you. Are you injured?" Katherine's vision swam. She saw a tall man, perhaps 24 or 25 years old, with dark hair that curled slightly at the collar of his dusty shirt. His eyes were an unexpected shade of gray-green, concerned rather than threatening. He wore the practical clothing of a working cowhand, nothing fancy, and a gun belt that looked well used but not ostentatious. "The bandits," she managed to say. "They're coming." "They're gone," he told her. "Rode off when they saw me and my brother coming up the trail. Can you walk?" She tried to answer, but her knees buckled. He caught her before she hit the ground, his arms strong and sure. The world tilted again, but this time it felt safer somehow. "I've got you," he said. "My name is Dalton Foster. You're going to be all right." Katherine wanted to believe him. She wanted to believe anything that would make the fear subside. But as consciousness slipped away from her like water through cupped hands, all she could think was that she had traveled 1,500 miles to start a new life, and she might not survive to see even one day of it. When she woke, she was lying on something soft. Not a bed exactly, but a bedroll spread over hay in what appeared to be a barn. Afternoon light slanted through gaps in the wooden walls, painting golden stripes across the dirt floor. Her ribs ached with every breath, and her head throbbed, but she was alive. Someone had cleaned the blood from her face and wrapped a bandage around her left forearm, though she didn't remember injuring it. "You're awake." The voice came from nearby. Katherine turned her head carefully and saw Dalton Foster sitting on an overturned crate, watching her with those unusual eyes. "How do you feel?" "Like I was in a stagecoach wreck," she said, then surprised herself by almost laughing. The pain in her ribs made her regret it immediately. "Try not to move too much. Doc Henderson thinks you've got at least 2 cracked ribs and a concussion. You were lucky. The driver didn't make it. I'm sorry." The words hit her like a physical blow. She hadn't known the driver's name, had barely exchanged 3 sentences with him when she boarded in Santa Fe that morning, but he had been alive and now he wasn't. Because of bandits. Because of random violence on a random road. "Where am I?" she asked. "About 15 miles outside Roswell." "This is the Fletcher Ranch. They're good people. Let me bring you here after the attack. The town doctor rode out to check on you." Katherine tried to sit up, failed, and let herself sink back onto the bedroll. "I need to get to Roswell. I have a position waiting for me there." "You're not going anywhere for at least a few days," Dalton said firmly. "Doctor's orders. What kind of position? I'm to be the new schoolteacher." She felt tears prickling at her eyes and blinked them back angrily. She had not cried when her father died 6 months ago, had not cried when she sold everything she owned to buy the train ticket west, had not cried through any of the difficulties and disappointments of the past half-year. She would not cry now. "School starts in a week. I need to be there." "A week is plenty of time to heal enough to travel, and Roswell's not going anywhere." Dalton leaned forward, his expression serious. "You nearly died today, Miss Preston, Katherine Preston. Miss Preston, you nearly died today. You need to rest and let yourself heal. Pushing yourself now could make things worse." She knew he was right, but accepting it felt like admitting defeat. Katherine had spent her entire 22 years in Philadelphia, living in her father's house, following her father's rules, becoming the woman her father thought she should be. Quiet, proper, educated but not too educated, accomplished but not ambitious. When he died and left her with nothing but debts and disappointed suitors, she had seen it as an opportunity. A terrible, grief-stained opportunity, but an opportunity nonetheless. The West was wild and rough. Everyone said so, but it was also new. A place where she could become someone different, someone braver. Getting shot at and nearly dying on her first day did not fit into that plan. "Are you a ranch hand here?" she asked, partly to change the subject and partly because she wanted to know. "Sometimes. I work wherever there's work that needs doing. Right now I'm helping the Fletchers move their cattle to higher pasture before winter sets in. Me and my brother, we travel mostly, go where the work is." "That sounds—" She searched for the right word. "Unsettled." He smiled slightly. "I suppose it is, but I like seeing new places, meeting new people. Never felt much desire to put down roots anywhere permanent." Katherine thought about roots. She thought about her father's house in Philadelphia with its dark wallpaper and darker memories. She thought about the teaching certificate she had worked so hard to earn, studying by candlelight after her father went to bed, because he thought too much education made women unmarriageable. She thought about the letter from the Roswell School Board, offering her a position and a new start. "I think roots might be nice," she said quietly, "if you choose where to plant them yourself." Something in Dalton's expression shifted, softened. "That's a good way of thinking about it." They sat in companionable silence for a while. Katherine dozed off twice, jerking awake each time with her heart racing, the memory of gunshots too fresh. The second time she found Dalton still there, patient and watchful. "You don't have to stay with me," she said. "I'm sure you have work to do." "Work can wait. You shouldn't be alone right now." "Why?" The question came out more sharply than she intended. "Why are you being kind to me? You don't know me." Dalton considered this seriously. "My mother died when I was 12, he said finally. "Stage accident, not too different from what happened to you today. There was a man there, a stranger, who stayed with her while my father rode for the doctor. He held her hand so she wouldn't be scared, didn't leave until it was over." He looked away, out toward the slanting light. "I always thought I'd like to be that kind of person, the kind who stays." Katherine felt something crack open in her chest, some wall she had built and maintained for so long that she had forgotten it was there. I'm sorry about your mother. It was a long time ago. He turned back to her. But thank you. Over the next 3 days, Katherine healed slowly in the Fletcher barn. Dalton brought her meals and checked on her regularly, though he never stayed long enough to seem improper. Mrs. Fletcher, a round-faced woman with kind eyes and flour perpetually dusting her apron, came by twice daily to help Katherine with personal matters and change her bandages. The doctor visited once more and pronounced her recovery satisfactory. On the 4th day, Katherine felt well enough to venture outside. Dalton helped her walk to a spot near the corral where she could sit on a bench and watch the ranch hands work. The New Mexico landscape stretched out in all directions, vast and empty and somehow beautiful in its starkness. The sky seemed bigger here than it ever had in Philadelphia, a dome of impossible blue. "It's so different," she said, more to herself than to Dalton, who had settled onto the fence rail nearby. "Everything is different. Different bad or different good. I'm not sure yet." She watched a cowhand lead a horse past, the animal's coat gleaming copper in the sun. In Philadelphia, everything was so close together, so cramped. Here it feels like you could walk for days and never see another person. "You could," Dalton agreed. "People get lost out here sometimes." "The land doesn't forgive mistakes." "Does that frighten you?" He thought about it. "No, but I respect it. There's a difference." He hopped down from the fence and came to sit beside her on the bench, careful to maintain a proper distance. "What made you want to come west?" "If you don't mind me asking." Katherine hesitated. She had prepared an answer for this question, something about wanting adventure and new experiences. But looking at Dalton's open, honest face, she found herself telling the truth instead. "I wanted to stop being afraid," she said. "Back home, I was afraid of everything. Afraid of disappointing my father, afraid of saying the wrong thing, afraid of becoming one of those sad women who never married and just withered away in someone else's house. After he died and I had nothing left, I realized that being afraid hadn't protected me from anything. It had just made me smaller." She took a breath, feeling her ribs protest. "I thought coming here might make me bigger, braver, someone who wasn't afraid all the time." "And then you got shot at on your first day." "Yes, that was unfortunate timing." Dalton laughed, a real laugh that crinkled the corners of his eyes. "You have a gift for understatement, Miss Preston." "Katherine," she said, "if you're going to save my life and watch me sleep drooling on a hay bale for 3 days, you might as well call me Katherine." "Katherine," he repeated, and she liked the way her name sounded in his voice, rougher and warmer than the Philadelphia accents she was used to. "All right then. And you can call me Dalton. I already have been." "So you have." He tilted his head, studying her. "Can I tell you something? I think you're already braver than you give yourself credit for. Most people who go through what you went through would still be shaking. But here you are, sitting outside in the sun, making jokes about it." "I shake at night," Katherine admitted. "When I try to sleep. I hear the gunshots again and my whole body shakes. That's normal. That's not weakness, it's just your mind trying to make sense of something senseless." He looked out at the horizon. "After my mother died, I used to wake up screaming, did that for months. My father didn't know what to do with me and my brother was too young to understand. Eventually it got better, but it took time." "How much time?" "Different for everyone, I think." "But Katherine." He waited until she met his eyes. "It does get better, I promise you that." She wanted to believe him. More than that, she found that she did believe him. There was something steady about Dalton Foster, something that made promises feel like solid ground instead of empty words. "Thank you," she said, "for everything. For saving me, for staying, for being kind. You don't need to thank me." "Yes, I do. Kindness should be acknowledged. My father taught me that, at least." She smiled slightly. "It was possibly the only useful thing he taught me." Dalton opened his mouth to respond, but before he could speak, another man came riding up fast, his horse lathered with sweat. He dismounted in a rush and strode over to them. "Dalton, we've got trouble. 3 head of cattle are missing from the northern section, and there are tracks. Looks like rustlers, maybe the same group that hit the Miller place last month." Dalton stood immediately. "How fresh are the tracks?" "Fresh enough. Mr. Fletcher wants everyone who can ride to help track them down before they get too far." The man noticed Katherine and touched his hat briefly. "Madam." "Go," Katherine said before Dalton could speak. "I'm fine here. Mrs. Fletcher is inside if I need anything." "Are you sure?" "I'm sure. Go do what you need to do." He hesitated only a moment longer, then nodded. "I'll check on you when I get back." Katherine watched him stride away toward the barn, moving with the easy confidence of someone completely comfortable in his own body. Within minutes, he and 5 other men were mounted and riding north, dust rising in their wake. Mrs. Fletcher appeared beside the bench, wiping her hands on her apron. "Rustlers," she said with disgust, "getting bolder every year. Used to be they'd only hit the big ranches, but now they'll take from anyone." She looked at Katherine. "How are you feeling, dear?" "Better. Strong enough to go into town soon, I think. Dalton will be disappointed to see you go." Katherine felt heat rise in her cheeks. "I'm sure he's just being polite. He seems like a very polite person." Mrs. Fletcher's smile was knowing. "Oh, he's polite enough. But he's never spent 4 days hovering over any other injured person who's passed through here, and we've had a few. That boy is smitten, mark my words. He barely knows me. Sometimes that's when it hits the hardest. When you meet someone and something just clicks, like puzzle pieces fitting together." She patted Katherine's shoulder. "My husband proposed to me 3 days after we met. I thought he was insane. But 42 years later, here we are, still fitting together just fine." Katherine didn't know what to say to that. She had never been smitten with anyone, never felt that mysterious click that everyone talked about. She had received 2 marriage proposals back in Philadelphia, both from men her father approved of, both as romantic as a business contract. She had turned them both down, which had caused considerable friction before her father's death. The idea that someone like Dalton Foster might be interested in her seemed absurd. But that night, as she lay in the barn trying to sleep, she found herself thinking about the way he had looked at her. The patience in his presence, the warmth in his voice when he said her name. And she wondered, just for a moment, what it might feel like to be smitten, to have that click happen. The men returned late the next afternoon, dirty and tired but successful. They had tracked the rustlers to a canyon and recovered the cattle without any gunfire, though it had been a near thing. Dalton came to find Katherine as soon as he had tended to his horse. She was sitting outside again, reading a book that Mrs. Fletcher had loaned her. "We got them back," he said, dropping onto the bench beside her with a tired sigh. "All 3 head, plus 2 more that had been stolen from another ranch. Rustlers got away, though. Too many bolt holes in that canyon. Is everyone all right?" "A few bruises, nothing serious." He tilted his head back, exposing the strong line of his throat. "Lord, I'm tired. Haven't slept in 30 hours. Then why are you here instead of sleeping? Wanted to make sure you were all right." He rolled his head to look at her. "Are you?" "Yes, Mrs. Fletcher has been taking good care of me. I think I'm well enough to travel to Roswell tomorrow." Something flickered across his face, there and gone too quickly to name. "Tomorrow? Are you sure you're ready? School starts in 3 days. I need to find my lodgings, meet with the school board, prepare my classroom. I've already lost almost a week." She closed the book, keeping one finger inside to mark her place. "I'll hire someone to take me in a wagon. Dr. Henderson said I shouldn't ride horseback yet, but a wagon should be fine." "I'll take you," Dalton said immediately. Save you the cost of hiring someone. You don't have to do that. You've already done so much for me. I want to. He sat up straighter, suddenly more awake. Besides, those bandits are still out there somewhere. You shouldn't travel alone. Katherine wanted to argue, wanted to prove that she could manage on her own, but the memory of gunshots and splintering wood was still too fresh. "All right," she said. "Thank you, again. You know, if you keep thanking me, I'm going to start charging you. What's your rate?" "One smile per thank you. I'm building up quite a debt here." Katherine laughed before she could stop herself. "That's a terrible business model. Smiles have no monetary value. Maybe not, but they're worth something anyway." They left at dawn the next morning, Katherine's few rescued belongings packed into the back of a buckboard wagon. She wore the same dress she had been wearing during the accident, now cleaned and mended by Mrs. Fletcher's patient hands. It was wrinkled and slightly scorched in one place, but it was serviceable. She had lost her hat in the wreck, which meant the sun would probably burn her face on the journey, but there was nothing to be done about it. Dalton helped her up onto the wagon seat with careful hands, making sure she was settled before climbing up beside her. He had borrowed the buckboard from the Fletchers and would return it after delivering Katherine safely to town. It was a cool morning, the sky just beginning to lighten from black to deep blue. In the distance, coyotes sang their last songs before daybreak. "Ready?" Dalton asked. Katherine took a breath, feeling her ribs pull. "Ready." The journey took most of the day, moving slowly over rutted roads that made Katherine's ribs ache despite Dalton's careful driving. They stopped twice to rest the horses, and once to eat the lunch Mrs. Fletcher had packed for them. Katherine found herself watching Dalton as he handled the horses, efficient and gentle with the animals. His hands were scarred and calloused from hard work, but there was nothing rough about the way he moved. Everything was deliberate, considered. "Can I ask you something personal?" she said during one of their rest stops. They were sitting in the shade of a scraggly cottonwood tree, sharing an apple. "You can ask. Can't promise I'll answer." "Why don't you want to settle down? You mentioned not wanting roots, but I'm curious about why." Dalton was quiet for a long moment, watching the horses drink from a small stream. "My father owns a ranch up in Colorado," he said finally. "Not huge, but decent-sized. He always assumed I'd take it over someday, work the land like he did, like his father did. But when I was 19, I realized that the thought of spending the rest of my life in the same place, doing the same things, surrounded by the same people, made me feel like I was suffocating." He glanced at her. "That probably sounds ungrateful. It sounds honest. My brother, he loves it there. He's exactly the son my father wanted. But me, I needed to see what else was out there, so I left. Been working odd jobs ever since, moving from place to place. My father barely speaks to me now, says I'm wasting my potential. What do you think?" "I think potential is just a word people use when they want you to be something you're not." He turned to her fully. "Does that make sense?" "Yes," Katherine said. "It makes perfect sense. What about you? What did your father want you to be? Decorative? Obedient? Married to someone who would reflect well on his business interests?" She smiled without humor. "I was a disappointment in all three categories." "His loss," Dalton said firmly. "You're better than all of that." The simple certainty in his voice made something warm bloom in Katherine's chest. "You don't know that. You've known me less than a week. I know enough." He stood and offered her his hand. "We should keep moving if we want to reach Roswell before dark." Katherine took his hand, letting him pull her gently to her feet. For just a moment, they stood close enough that she could see the darker ring around his irises, the small scar above his left eyebrow. Her heart did something strange in her chest, a little stumble step that had nothing to do with her injuries. "Dalton," she started to say, but didn't know how to finish the sentence. Yes. Nothing. Never mind. They reached Roswell as the sun was setting, painting the desert in shades of orange and purple. The town was larger than Katherine had expected, with a main street lined with businesses and several residential areas spreading out from the center. Dalton drove the wagon to the address Katherine had for her lodgings, a modest boarding house on the east side of town, run by a widow named Mrs. Garrett. The landlady came out to meet them, a thin woman in her 50s with sharp eyes and a disapproving expression. "Miss Preston, we expected you a week ago. The school board was getting worried. I apologize for the delay. My stagecoach was attacked by bandits. I was injured in the resulting accident." Mrs. Garrett's expression softened slightly. "I heard about that terrible business. The driver was killed, I understand." "Yes. Well, come inside. I've kept your room available." She looked at Dalton with new suspicion. "And who is this?" "Dalton Foster, madam. I'm just helping Miss Preston get settled. I'll be on my way shortly. See that you are. I run a respectable house." Dalton carried Katherine's bags inside while Mrs. Garrett showed her to a small but clean room on the second floor. It had a narrow bed, a washstand, a writing desk, and a window that looked out over the street. After the barn, it felt impossibly civilized. "Rent is due every 2 weeks," Mrs. Garrett was saying. "Breakfast is at 7, dinner at 6. No male visitors above the first floor, no exceptions. Laundry is done on Mondays. Do you have any questions?" "No, thank you. This is perfect." Mrs. Garrett sniffed as if perfection was a bit much to claim and left. Dalton set Katherine's bags down near the bed and stood awkwardly in the doorway, clearly aware of the no male visitors rule. "Well," he said, "I should go. Let you rest and get settled." "Thank you for everything," Katherine said. "I don't know what I would have done without you. You would have been fine. You're stronger than you think." He hesitated, then added, "The school is 3 blocks west on Main Street. Can't miss it. And if you need anything at all, I'm staying at the Frontier Hotel for the next few days. After that, I'll be back at the Fletcher Ranch." "You're staying in town. Need to pick up some supplies for the ranch. Might as well do it now." He smiled slightly. "And I want to make sure you're all right, that you're settling in well." Katherine felt that strange warmth again, spreading through her chest like sunlight. "I'd like that. I'd like to see you again." His smile widened. "Tomorrow, I could show you around town, introduce you to some people." "Tomorrow would be wonderful." After he left, Katherine sat on the edge of her narrow bed and tried to sort through the tangle of feelings in her chest. She barely knew Dalton Foster. They had met less than a week ago under traumatic circumstances. Everything she had been taught about propriety and appropriate behavior said that she should maintain a polite distance, should focus on her new position and building her reputation in town. But when she thought about not seeing him again, about him riding back to the Fletcher Ranch and then on to wherever the next job took him, she felt something that might have been panic, or grief, or both. She had traveled 1,500 miles to become someone new, someone braver. Maybe brave meant letting herself feel things she had never allowed before. Maybe brave meant taking a risk on a cowboy with kind eyes and careful hands who made her laugh even when her ribs hurt. Maybe brave meant learning what she had always been too afraid to pursue. Katherine met Dalton outside Mrs. Garrett's boarding house the next morning, dressed in her second-best dress and a borrowed bonnet to protect her face from the sun. He wore clean clothes and had clearly made an effort to tame his curling hair, though it was already escaping to fall across his forehead. He smiled when he saw her, and Katherine felt her heart do that strange stumble step again. "How did you sleep?" he asked as they started walking toward the center of town. "Better than I expected. The bed is much more comfortable than the barn, though the barn had better company." He laughed. Mrs. Fletcher will be thrilled to hear she's been compared favorably to a boarding house mattress. They spent the morning exploring Roswell. Dalton showed her the general store where she could buy supplies, the church where many of the townspeople gathered on Sundays, the doctor's office, the post office. Everywhere they went, people greeted Dalton warmly. He seemed to know everyone, or at least everyone seemed to know him. "You come to Roswell often?" Katherine asked as they walked toward the school building. "A few times a year, usually. Good place to pick up work, and the people are decent." He nodded to a man across the street. "That's Tom Williams. He runs the livery stable. Honest man, won't cheat you on horse boarding. And that's Sally Chen there, she owns the restaurant. Best food in town, hands down." The school building was a simple wooden structure, freshly painted white, with a bell tower and a small yard where children could play. Katherine stood looking at it for a long moment, feeling a mix of excitement and terror. "This is it," she said quietly. "This is where I'll work. Where I'll teach." Nervous, terrified. "You'll be wonderful," Dalton said with complete confidence. "Those kids are lucky to have you. You don't know that." "Yes, I do. You're smart and brave and patient. You care about doing things right. That's exactly what a good teacher needs to be." Katherine wanted to kiss him. The thought arrived suddenly and startlingly clear. She wanted to turn to him right there in the middle of the street and kiss him until neither of them could breathe. Instead, she clasped her hands together and said, "Would you like to have lunch?" "My treat, to thank you for the tour." "You don't need to thank me. I want to. Besides, you said Sally Chen has the best food in town. I'd like to try it." The restaurant was small but spotlessly clean, with red checked curtains and the smell of fresh bread filling the air. Sally Chen herself came to take their order, a petite woman in her 40s with laugh lines around her eyes. "Dalton Foster," she said with obvious pleasure. "I haven't seen you in months. Where have you been?" "Working a ranch up near Santa Fe. Just got back a few days ago." He gestured to Katherine. "Sally, this is Katherine Preston. She's the new school teacher. The one from the stagecoach attack. I heard about that terrible thing." Sally shook Katherine's hand warmly. "Welcome to Roswell, Miss Preston. I hope you'll be very happy here." They ordered the daily special, which turned out to be roasted chicken with vegetables and fresh bread. The food was indeed excellent, and Katherine found herself eating more than she had in days. As they ate, Dalton told her stories about some of his jobs, the places he had been, the people he had met. He was a good storyteller, bringing scenes to life with small details and gentle humor. "What's the strangest job you've ever had?" Katherine asked, genuinely curious. "That would be the time I worked for a traveling photographer up in Wyoming. He needed someone to help him carry his equipment and convince people to sit for portraits. Most folks were suspicious of the camera, thought it might steal their soul or bring bad luck. Did you convince them?" "Some of them. Helped that I was willing to have my own picture taken first, to prove it was safe." He grinned. "Still have a copy of that photograph somewhere. I look about 17 and scared half to death, but it did the trick. I'd like to see that photograph someday." "Someday," he agreed, and something in the way he said it made it sound like a promise. After lunch, they walked to the edge of town where the buildings gave way to open desert. They sat on a low stone wall watching the heat shimmer in the distance. "Can I ask you something?" Dalton said after a comfortable silence, "Of course." "Yesterday you said you came west to stop being afraid, but what are you hoping to find? Besides just the absence of fear." Katherine thought about it carefully. No one had ever asked her that before. "Purpose, I think. In Philadelphia, I always felt like I was just filling time, waiting for something to happen. My father chose my activities, my father approved my friends, my father decided what I should learn and think and be. Even the good things felt hollow because they weren't mine. Does that make sense?" Yes. I want to build something that's mine, something that matters. I want to make a difference even if it's just a small one. I want to look back on my life someday and think that I did something meaningful with it. She looked at him. That probably sounds naive. It sounds hopeful. Nothing wrong with that. He picked up a small stone and turned it over in his hands. I think I've been looking for the same thing in a way, just looking in different places, moving from job to job, always thinking the next one might be the one that means something. And has any of them been? Some more than others. Helping a family get their harvest in before a storm hit, that felt meaningful. Tracking down stolen horses for a man who couldn't afford to lose them, that mattered. But it's all temporary. I finish the job and move on, and I wonder sometimes if I'm actually making a difference or just treading water. He looked at her directly. Meeting you felt different, though. Felt like something that might actually matter. Catherine's breath caught in her throat. Dalton. I know we barely know each other. I know this probably isn't proper or appropriate or any of those things people are supposed to be. But I'd like to know you better, Katherine. I'd like to spend time with you if you're willing. I'm willing, she said, the words coming out before she could second-guess them. I want that too, even though I don't have roots, even though I might leave again when the next job calls, even though we can figure out what this is as we go. She smiled slightly. Besides, I'm still learning how to be brave. Having you around might help. He smiled back, warm and genuine. Then we'll learn together. Over the next 2 weeks, Katherine settled into her new life in Roswell. She met with the school board, a group of serious-faced men who grilled her about her qualifications and teaching philosophy. She prepared her classroom, arranging desks and organizing books. She met some of the families whose children would be her students, trying to make a good impression despite her Eastern accent and new-to-town status. And whenever she had free time, she spent it with Dalton. They took walks together in the evening when the worst heat of the day had passed. They had dinner at Sally Chen's restaurant. They sat on Mrs. Garrett's front porch, carefully respecting propriety while finding excuses to let their hands brush together. Dalton told her stories about his travels, and Katherine told him about Philadelphia, about her father, about the dreams she had kept locked away for so long. I always wanted to write, she confessed one evening as they watched the sun set over the desert. Stories, poems, anything. But my father said it was frivolous, that I should focus on accomplishments that would make me marriageable. Will you write now? Dalton asked. I don't know, maybe, if I have time. Make time. Life's too short to put off the things that matter to you. Katherine looked at him, this man who had appeared in her life so suddenly and changed it so completely. You're right. I will. The day before school was set to begin, Dalton told her he needed to return to the Fletcher ranch. His job there was finishing up, and he had already stayed in Roswell longer than planned. How long will you be gone? Katherine asked, trying to keep the disappointment out of her voice. A few weeks, maybe a month. Depends on how long the work takes. They were sitting on a bench near the school, the building dark and quiet in the evening light. I don't want to leave, but I gave Mr. Fletcher my word that I'd see the job through. I understand. You have responsibilities. I'll come back, though. As soon as the job is done, I'll come back. He took her hand, a bold gesture in public even in the relaxed social environment of Roswell. Katherine, I need to tell you something. Her heart started beating faster. What is it? I've never felt like this before, about anyone. I've known plenty of women, had friends, even thought I was falling in love once or twice. But this is different. You're different. He squeezed her hand gently. I think about you all the time, when I wake up, when I'm working, when I'm trying to sleep. I imagine showing you places I've been, hearing what you think about things, making you laugh. I've only known you 2 weeks, but I can't imagine not knowing you now. Katherine felt tears prickling at her eyes. "I've never felt like this either," she said quietly. "I've never felt anything like this before. I don't even know what to call it. Maybe we don't need to call it anything yet. Maybe we just let it be what it is. Dalton, I need to tell you something too. I need you to understand something about me." She took a breath, gathering her courage. "I've never been in love before. Never. I don't know how it's supposed to feel or what I'm supposed to do. The men who courted me in Philadelphia, I felt nothing for them. Nothing real anyway. I thought maybe I was broken somehow, that I wasn't capable of feeling those kinds of things." "You're not broken. But I don't know if what I'm feeling now is real. I don't know if it's love or just gratitude because you saved my life. I don't know how to tell the difference." She was crying now, frustrated tears that she wiped away angrily. "And I don't want to hurt you by not knowing." Dalton was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "Then we'll learn what it means together. You and me. We'll figure it out as we go and we'll be honest with each other about what we're feeling. No pretending, no trying to be something we're not. Just honest." "Just honest," Katherine repeated. "And Katherine, for what it's worth, I don't think you're broken. I think you just never met anyone who made you want to take the risk. That's not the same thing." She leaned her head against his shoulder, a gesture that would have scandalized Philadelphia society but barely raised an eyebrow in Roswell. He put his arm around her carefully, mindful of her still healing ribs. "I'm going to miss you," she said. "I'll miss you too, but I'll write. Every few days, I promise. And I'll be back before you know it." Katherine's first day as a schoolteacher arrived with clear blue skies and enough butterflies in her stomach to start a migration. She stood at the front of the classroom, looking at the 23 children ranging from age 6 to 14 who would be her students. They looked back at her with expressions ranging from curious to skeptical to outright hostile. "Good morning," she said, proud that her voice came out steady. "My name is Miss Preston, and I'm very happy to be your teacher this year. I know I'm new here and I know I talk differently than you're used to, but I promise you that I'm here to help you learn and grow. We're going to have a good year together." The first few days were hard. Some of the older boys tested her, talking back, refusing to complete assignments. Some of the younger children cried for their parents. One girl, a 12-year-old named Emma, seemed determined to make Katherine's life as difficult as possible, questioning everything and encouraging other students to misbehave. But Katherine had not traveled 1,500 miles to give up on the first challenge. She stayed patient, stayed firm, and slowly, gradually, the students began to settle. She discovered she had a gift for explaining difficult concepts in ways that made sense. She learned each child's strengths and struggles, tailoring her lessons to help them succeed. She brought in wildflowers to teach botany, used problems about cattle and crops to make arithmetic relevant, read stories that made even the most reluctant students lean forward in their seats. By the end of the second week, Emma approached her desk after the other students had left. "Miss Preston, I'm sorry I was so mean when you started." Katherine looked up from the papers she was grading. "Why were you mean, Emma?" "I liked our old teacher. When the school board said they were bringing in someone new from back east, I thought you'd be stuck up. Thought you'd think you were better than us." "And what do you think now?" Emma considered this seriously. "I think you're pretty nice and you're a good teacher, better than Mr. Harris was actually, even though I liked him." "Thank you, Emma. That means a lot to me." As Emma left, Katherine felt a warmth that had nothing to do with the New Mexico sun. This was what she had come west for. This feeling of purpose, of making a real difference. Her students might not remember every lesson she taught them, but they would remember that someone cared about their learning. Someone believed they were capable. True to his word, Dalton wrote to her regularly. His letters arrived every few days, full of details about his work at the ranch and questions about her teaching. He had a good hand for someone who claimed not to like writing, clear and confident. Katherine kept every letter in a small wooden box under her bed and read them over and over until she had them memorized. She wrote back just as regularly, telling him about her students, about the challenges and small victories of teaching, about how Roswell was beginning to feel like home. She told him about the church social she attended, about the women who were starting to accept her, about the strange beauty of watching thunderstorms roll across the desert. And in every letter, she felt herself growing closer to him, despite the miles between them. Nearly 6 weeks after he had left, Dalton returned to Roswell. Katherine was in her classroom after school hours, writing the next day's lessons on the blackboard, when she heard footsteps in the doorway. She turned and saw him standing there, dusty from the road and smiling at her like she was water in the desert. "You're back," she said, and her voice came out breathless. "I'm back." He stayed in the doorway, respecting the propriety of the situation. "Job's done. I'm a free man for a while." Katherine set down the chalk, not caring that it left white dust on her dark dress. "How long are you staying?" "Don't know yet. Depends on a few things." "What things?" "Whether there's a reason to stay, whether someone wants me to stay." Katherine understood what he was asking. She walked toward him slowly, stopping just inside the appropriate distance for polite conversation. "I want you to stay. I missed you terribly." "I missed you too. Your letters were the best part of every day." He glanced around the classroom, taking in the children's drawings pinned to the walls, the neat rows of desks, the bookshelf she had organized by subject. "You've done a wonderful job here, I can tell." "How can you tell?" "The room feels loved, cared for, that's you." Over the next several months, Katherine and Dalton built something together, though neither of them could quite name what it was. He found work at various ranches around Roswell, staying in town rather than moving on as he usually did. They saw each other as often as propriety and their schedules allowed. They attended church socials together, went on supervised walks, sat on Mrs. Garrett's porch talking until the landlady pointedly reminded them of the late hour. Katherine introduced Dalton to some of her students' families, and he charmed them all with his easy manner and genuine interest in their lives. He helped one family repair their barn after a windstorm. He taught some of the older boys better rope handling techniques. He became part of the community in a way he had never allowed himself to be before. "You're putting down roots," Katherine observed one evening as they walked along the edge of town. It was early December now, the air cool enough that she wore a shawl over her dress. "Maybe I am," Dalton admitted. "Doesn't feel like suffocating this time, though." "What's different?" He stopped walking and turned to face her. You're the difference. When I left here to go work at other places, I spent the whole time wishing I was back here. When I think about the future now, you're in it." "That's never happened to me before." Katherine felt her breath catch. "I think about the future too, about what it might look like." "And what do you see?" "I see myself still teaching. I love it more than I ever thought I could love any work, but I also see someone beside me. Someone to share things with, someone who makes me laugh and challenges me to be braver." She looked up at him. "I see you, Dalton, I see you there." "Katherine." He took her hands in his, a bold gesture even in the growing darkness. "I need to ask you something. I've been trying to find the right time, the right words, but I don't think there is a perfect time for this, so I'm just going to ask." Her heart started racing. "Ask me. Do you love me? Not gratitude, not friendship, not just comfort or habit. Real love, the kind that lasts." Katherine had been asking herself the same question for weeks now. She had spent so much time trying to analyze her feelings, trying to be sure before she named them. But standing here in the December twilight, holding his hands and looking into his eyes, She realized that certainty wasn't something you arrived at through careful thought. It was something you recognized when it was in front of you. "Yes," she said simply. "I love you. I think I've loved you since you stayed with me in the barn, even when you could have left. Maybe even since you caught me when I was falling. I just didn't have a name for it yet. And now you do. Now I do. This is love. Being with you, missing you when you're gone, wanting your happiness even more than my own, all of it. This is love." Dalton closed his eyes briefly as if in prayer or gratitude. When he opened them again, they were bright. "I love you too. I've never said that to anyone before, not like this. But I love you, Katherine. I want to spend my life with you. I want to wake up next to you and go to sleep beside you and argue with you about stupid things and make you laugh and watch you teach and just be with you every day for as long as we both live." Is that a proposal? Not yet. That's a declaration. The proposal comes after I've saved up enough money to buy a ring and a piece of land where we can build a home, unless you'd rather stay in town. I don't care about any of that. I just care about being with you, Katherine laughed, giddy with happiness and relief. We're really doing this. We're really going to be together. We really are. He pulled her close, propriety forgotten in the moment, and kissed her. It was her first real kiss, and it felt like everything she had read about and never quite believed. Like coming home and setting out on an adventure at the same time. Like finding something you didn't know you had lost. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Dalton rested his forehead against hers. "We'll learn what this means together," he said softly, "just like we promised." "Together," Katherine agreed. They married in April of 1884, 6 months after they first met. The wedding was small, held in the Roswell church with most of the town in attendance. Katherine wore a simple white dress that Mrs. Garrett and some of the other women had helped her make. Dalton wore a new suit that he had saved up to buy, looking uncomfortable but handsome in the formal clothes. His brother came down from Colorado to stand up with him, and Emma served as Katherine's bridesmaid, proud and serious in her best dress. Katherine's students sang during the ceremony, their young voices filling the small church with surprising beauty. Sally Chen provided the wedding breakfast afterward. Tom Williams from the livery stable played the fiddle for dancing. It was nothing like the elaborate Philadelphia weddings Katherine had attended growing up, but it was more joyful and genuine than any of those had been. "Happy?" Dalton asked as they danced together, his hand warm at her waist. "Extraordinarily happy," Katherine confirmed. "You?" "I didn't know I could feel like this, like everything finally makes sense." They spent their wedding night in a small house on the outskirts of town that Dalton had purchased with his savings. It was modest, just 3 rooms and a porch, but it was theirs. Dalton carried Katherine over the threshold, making her laugh as he nearly dropped her. "Not the most graceful entrance," he admitted, setting her down carefully. "I don't need graceful. I just need you." Later, lying in their marriage bed with Dalton's arms around her, Katherine thought about the journey that had brought her here. The stagecoach attack that had nearly killed her. The fear and pain and uncertainty. The slow building of trust and then affection and then love. All of it had led to this moment, this feeling of absolute rightness. "What are you thinking about?" Dalton asked, his voice drowsy. "I'm thinking that I came west looking for purpose and bravery, but I found you instead, and that turned out to be exactly what I needed. I found you too." Found home finally after years of looking. He kissed the top of her head. "Thank you for teaching me what that means." "We learned together," Katherine reminded him. "That was always the plan." Katherine continued teaching for the next year, though it became more challenging as her pregnancy progressed. By March of 1885, she was too visibly expectant to continue, and she reluctantly turned her classroom over to a substitute. She missed her students terribly, but she was also excited about the new adventure ahead. Their son was born in May, a healthy baby with Dalton's dark hair and Catherine's determined chin. They named him Daniel, and he was loud and demanding and completely perfect. Dalton was a natural father, patient and gentle with the baby. He would walk the floor for hours when Daniel was fussy, singing to him in a low voice that somehow always worked. "You're so good with him," Katherine said one evening, watching from the bed as Dalton changed Daniel's diaper with practiced efficiency. "He's easy to be good with. Look at this face." He held the baby up, making exaggerated expressions that made Daniel wave his tiny fists. "Besides, I'm just following your example. You taught me about patience, remember?" "I don't remember teaching you anything. You taught me everything that matters." When Daniel was 6 months old, Katherine received a letter that changed everything. It was from a publisher in Boston, who had somehow obtained a copy of one of the stories she had been writing in her spare time. Apparently, one of her former students' parents, who traveled regularly for business, had read the story and thought it was good enough to share with a publishing friend. The publisher agreed and wanted to know if she had more work available. "Dalton, listen to this," Katherine said, reading the letter aloud with shaking hands. "He wants to publish my story. He's offering money. Not much, but actual money for something I wrote." Dalton scooped her up and spun her around, careful not to disturb Daniel, who was napping in his cradle. "That's wonderful. I told you your writing was good. You're required to say that. You're my husband. I'm required to love you. I'm not required to lie about your talent." He set her down, grinning. "My wife, the published author. I'm going to tell everyone." The story was published 6 months later in a small literary magazine. It was about a woman traveling west on a stagecoach, though Katherine had given it a much happier ending than her own journey had initially had. Seeing her words in print felt surreal and wonderful. She wrote more stories after that, working during Daniel's naps and in the evenings after Dalton came home from work. Some were published, some weren't, but she kept writing because it made her happy. Dalton continued working at various ranches around Roswell, but he always came home at night. The traveling life he had once loved held no appeal anymore. He had found his place, and it was here with Katherine and Daniel, building a life one day at a time. "You ever miss it?" Katherine asked him one night as they sat on their porch, watching the stars come out. Daniel was asleep inside, and the evening was cool and peaceful. "The traveling, the freedom to go wherever you wanted. Sometimes I think about it," Dalton admitted. "Remember certain places fondly, but I don't miss it. Not really. This is better. This is everything." 2 years later, they had a daughter. Margaret arrived screaming into the world on a stormy October night, smaller than Daniel had been but just as fierce. She had Katherine's eyes and what promised to be Dalton's stubborn streak. Daniel, now 3, was fascinated by his baby sister and wanted to help with everything. "Gentle," Katherine reminded him as he tried to feed Margaret a piece of bread. "She doesn't have teeth yet. When will she get teeth? In a few months. You'll have to be patient." "Father says patience is important. Your father is very wise." Life settled into a rhythm. Katherine returned to teaching part-time when Margaret was old enough, working 3 days a week while a neighbor watched the children. She continued writing in whatever spare moments she could find. Dalton started his own small ranch, just a few head of cattle at first, building it slowly and carefully. They saved money, improved their house, added a proper kitchen and an extra bedroom. On their 5th wedding anniversary, Dalton surprised Katherine with a gift. It was a leather-bound journal, expensive and beautiful, with her initials embossed on the cover in gold. "For your stories," he said as she turned it over in her hands, marveling at the quality. "You're always writing on scraps of paper and the backs of old letters. You deserve something better." Katherine felt tears pricking at her eyes. "This is too much." "Nothing is too much for you. You gave me everything, Katherine. A home, a family, a purpose. The least I can do is give you something to write in." She kissed him, deep and long, until they were both breathless. "I love you. I love you so much it scares me sometimes. Don't be scared. We're in this together, remember. Whatever comes, we'll face it together." What came was challenges, as life always brings. There were years when the cattle prices were low and money was tight. There were illnesses. Daniel with a fever that lasted 5 terrifying days. Margaret with a cough that wouldn't go away. There were disagreements, sometimes heated, about money or child rearing or the 100 small things that couples argue about. There were losses. Dalton's father passing away and leaving a complicated legacy of regret and unfinished business. But through all of it, they held to their promise. They were honest with each other. They learned what love meant in all its forms. The passionate moments and the quiet companionship, the grand gestures and the small daily kindnesses. The times when love was easy and the times when it was hard work. On their 10th wedding anniversary, they renewed their vows in the same church where they had married. Daniel was 8 now, Margaret 5, and Katherine was pregnant again with their 3rd child. The church was fuller than it had been at their first wedding, packed with friends and neighbors and students both past and present. "I didn't think I could love you more than I did 10 years ago," Dalton said when it was his turn to speak. "But I was wrong. I love you more every day. You made me better than I ever thought I could be. You gave me a home and a family and a reason to stop running. You taught me what it means to put down roots and watch something grow. I promise to spend the rest of my life being worthy of you." Katherine was crying openly, not caring who saw. "You saved my life in more ways than one. You taught me what it means to be brave, to take risks, to open my heart even when it's scary. You've been my partner in every sense of the word. I promise to keep learning what love means with you for as long as we both live." Their 3rd child, another son they named James, was born that winter. He was calm and quiet where his siblings had been loud, content to observe the world with serious eyes. Daniel and Margaret doted on him, fighting over who got to hold him or help feed him. The years continued to pass, marked by small milestones and large ones. Katherine published a collection of her stories, dedicated to Dalton and her children. Dalton's ranch grew steadily more successful. Daniel decided he wanted to be a teacher like his mother. Margaret announced she was going to be a rancher like her father. James was still too young to know what he wanted, but he followed his siblings everywhere with patient determination. On a warm evening in June of 1900, Katherine and Dalton sat on their porch watching the sunset. They were older now, graying at the temples, with lines around their eyes from years of squinting into the desert sun. Their children were inside arguing about something inconsequential. The ranch stretched out before them, the result of 16 years of hard work and careful planning. "Do you remember the day we met?" Katherine asked, leaning against Dalton's shoulder. "Every detail. You looked so scared and so brave at the same time. I knew immediately that you were someone special. I thought you were going to shoot me. I would never shoot you." "Well, not unless you really deserved it." Katherine laughed and elbowed him gently in the ribs. "I thought I was going to die that day, thought my story was over before it really began. But it wasn't, it was just starting. You know what the best part is?" Katherine looked up at him, this man who had been her partner and love for all these years. "I never would have chosen any of this. The stagecoach attack, the injury, being stranded outside Roswell. If someone had told me in Philadelphia that this was how my life would unfold, I would have been terrified. But it brought me here, to you, to this life. And I wouldn't change any of it. Not even the scary parts, especially not the scary parts. They taught me I was stronger than I thought, braver than I believed, capable of more love than I ever imagined. She took his hand, lacing their fingers together. You told me once that we would learn what love means together, and we did. We're still learning. Always learning, Dalton agreed. That's what keeps it interesting. They sat in comfortable silence as the sun sank lower, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink and purple. From inside the house came the sound of their children laughing, the argument apparently resolved. The air smelled of sage and dust, and the promise of rain. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote called out to the coming night. Katherine thought about the young woman she had been 16 years ago, frightened and uncertain, traveling to a strange place with nothing but hope and determination. That woman had been looking for purpose and courage. She had found both, but she had also found something she hadn't known she was looking for. She had found love, real and deep and enduring. She had found a partner who made her better. She had found a home, not just a place but a feeling, a sense of belonging that she had never experienced before. "Thank you," she said quietly. "For what? For staying with me that first day, for not leaving when you could have, for teaching me what it means to put down roots, for loving me even when I didn't know how to love you back." She turned to face him fully. "For everything, Dalton. For our whole life together." He cupped her face gently in his scarred, work-roughened hands. "You don't need to thank me for that. Loving you has been the easiest thing I've ever done, the most natural, the most right." He kissed her softly. "You're my home, Katherine. You always have been." The children called them in for dinner, and they stood together, hand in hand as they had been for 16 years. As they walked inside, Katherine felt a profound sense of gratitude for the strange twists of fate that had brought her here. For the bandits who had attacked her stagecoach, leading her to this place and this man. For the courage she had found to leave Philadelphia and travel west into the unknown. For the day she had confessed she had never loved before, and Dalton had promised they would learn what it meant together. They had kept that promise. Through joy and sorrow, through easy times and hard, through the raising of children and the building of a life, they had learned together. And they were still learning, still discovering new depths to their love, new ways to support and challenge and cherish each other. That night, after the children were in bed and the house was quiet, Katherine sat at her desk with the leather journal Dalton had given her years ago. She opened to a fresh page and began to write, the words flowing easily after so many years of practice. She wrote about a woman on a stagecoach, frightened and alone. She wrote about a cowboy who stopped to help, who stayed when he could have left. She wrote about learning to be brave, learning to put down roots, learning what love means when you have never known it before. She wrote about building a life one day at a time, one choice at a time, one act of courage at a time. And she wrote about how sometimes the most important journeys aren't about the destination at all. They're about who you become along the way and who you become with. They're about finding the courage to open your heart even when you're scared. They're about taking risks and making promises and keeping them even when it's hard. She wrote until her hand cramped and her eyes grew heavy. When she finally climbed into bed beside Dalton, who was already asleep, she felt a deep sense of contentment. This was her life. This was her choice. This was her love, and it was everything. The years that followed brought more changes, as years always do. Daniel grew up and became a teacher, taking a position at a school 2 towns over. He married a kind woman named Sarah who worked as a nurse, and they gave Katherine and Dalton their first grandchild, a girl named Katherine in honor of her grandmother. Margaret defied everyone's expectations by not only running a ranch, but starting a business breeding and training horses. She had a gift with animals that reminded Katherine of Dalton, patient and intuitive. James surprised them all by becoming interested in law, eventually traveling east to study, and then returning to open a practice in Roswell. Katherine continued to teach and write, finding fulfillment in both. She published several more collections of stories, each one drawing from her experiences in New Mexico, from the lives of the people around her. She never became famous or wealthy from her writing, but she touched readers with her honest portrayals of Western life and the quiet heroism of ordinary people. Dalton expanded his ranch gradually, never growing it so large that he lost the personal touch that made it successful. He was known throughout the region as a fair man, someone who paid his workers well and treated everyone with respect. Young men came to work for him not just for the wages but for the education, knowing that Dalton Foster would teach them everything he knew about ranching and about being a good man. They faced losses, too. Mrs. Garrett passed away when Katherine was 43, leaving her boarding house to Katherine in her will with a note that said simply, "You were like a daughter to me." Sally Chen died a few years later, and half the town turned out for her funeral. The Fletchers, who had taken Katherine in after the stagecoach attack, both passed within months of each other, dying as they had lived together. Each loss hurt, but Katherine and Dalton supported each other through the grief. They had learned long ago that sorrow shared is sorrow diminished, and they held to that truth through every difficulty. On their 25th wedding anniversary, the entire town of Roswell threw them a party. It was held in the schoolyard where Katherine had spent so many years teaching, with tables laden with food and music playing late into the night. Former students came from miles away to honor the teacher who had believed in them. Ranch hands and neighboring ranchers came to shake Dalton's hand and share stories. Friends and family filled every corner of the space. "I can't believe all these people came," Katherine said, looking around in wonder. "Why not? You've touched so many lives." Dalton pulled her close for a dance, moving slowly to the music. "You taught half the children in this county. You wrote stories that made people see their own lives differently. You built a community, Katherine. Of course they came. We built it together, you and me." "Together," he agreed, as he always did. As they danced, Katherine looked around at the faces of everyone they loved. Daniel was there with Sarah and their 3 children now. Margaret stood near the punch bowl, arguing good-naturedly with a cattle buyer about prices. James was deep in conversation with the mayor about some legal matter. Friends, neighbors, students, colleagues, all gathered to celebrate something that had started with a stagecoach attack and a cowboy who chose to stay. "I love you," Katherine said, the words as true now as they had been 25 years ago. More true, perhaps, strengthened by decades of choosing each other every day. "I love you too. Always have, always will." The years continued their steady march forward. Katherine retired from teaching at 55, not because she had to, but because she wanted more time to write and spend with her growing number of grandchildren. She had 7 now, with an 8th on the way, and she loved being the kind of grandmother who told stories and baked cookies and never scolded too harshly. Dalton scaled back his ranching operations, hiring a younger man to handle most of the daily work while he supervised and advised. He found he enjoyed the slower pace, the time to sit on the porch with Katherine and watch the sunset, the freedom to travel occasionally to visit their children and grandchildren. They took a trip to Philadelphia when Katherine was 58, her first time back since she had left at 22. The city felt smaller than she remembered, more cramped and gray. They visited her father's grave, and Katherine found she felt more pity than anger now. He had lived such a narrow life, controlled by fear and convention. She had lived something broader, richer, fuller. Are you glad we came?" Dalton asked as they stood in the cemetery. "Yes, I needed to see it again to know for certain that I made the right choice." She took his hand. "And I did. Leaving here, coming west, building a life with you, all of it was exactly right. No regrets, not a single one." They returned to New Mexico with relief, happy to be home. Katherine wrote more prolifically during these years, her stories growing deeper and more reflective. She wrote about aging and memory, about the weight of years and the lightness of love that endures. Critics began to take notice of her work, calling it an authentic voice of the American West, though Katherine never paid much attention to critical acclaim. "I write for me," she told a journalist who came to interview her when she was 62. "And for Dalton, and for my children and grandchildren. If other people enjoy it too, that's wonderful. But I'm not writing for fame or recognition. I'm writing because I have stories inside me that need to come out." The journalist's article, published in a prestigious Eastern magazine, brought Katherine a brief moment of wider recognition. She received letters from readers across the country, thanking her for her stories, sharing their own experiences. She answered every letter personally, finding joy in the connections her words had created. When Katherine turned 65, Dalton surprised her with a special gift. He had commissioned a local carpenter to build her a writing cabin, a small structure at the edge of their property with windows facing the desert and a stove to keep it warm in winter. Inside was a beautiful oak desk, a comfortable chair, and shelves for her books and journals. "So you have a place that's just yours," he explained as he showed it to her. "Somewhere quiet to write without grandchildren climbing on you or me interrupting to ask where you put the coffee." Katherine was crying as she explored the small space. "It's perfect." "Dalton, this is the most thoughtful gift anyone has ever given me. You've given me 40 years of happiness. A writing cabin seems like a small thing in comparison." She spent many hours in that cabin over the years that followed, writing stories and memoirs, corresponding with readers, simply sitting and looking out at the landscape she had grown to love so deeply. Sometimes Dalton would bring her lunch and sit with her for a while, the two of them comfortable in silence or gentle conversation. They celebrated their 50th wedding anniversary in 1934. They were both 73 now, moving more slowly but still sharp-minded and engaged with the world. The party was smaller than their 25th had been, some of their oldest friends having passed on, but it was no less joyful. All three of their children were there with their families. 14 grandchildren and 3 great-grandchildren filled the house with noise and laughter. 50 years, Katherine said as they cut the cake that Margaret had made. "Half a century." "Best 50 years of my life," Dalton said, kissing her to the applause of their family. That evening, after everyone had left and they were alone again, Katherine and Dalton sat on their porch as they had done thousands of times before. The porch was the same one they had sat on when they were newlyweds, though they had expanded and improved it over the years. The view was unchanged, the desert stretching out endlessly under the vast New Mexico sky. "You remember what you said to me that day I told you I had never loved before?" Katherine asked. "I said we would learn what it means together. And did we? Did we learn?" Dalton thought about this carefully. "I think we did. I think love is all the things we've experienced together. The joy and the sorrow, the passion and the companionship, the big moments and the small daily choices to keep choosing each other. It's not just one thing. It's everything." "That's beautiful," Katherine said softly. "I learned from the best." He squeezed her hand gently. "You taught me that, you know, how to see the beauty in ordinary things, how to be present in each moment, how to love not just in the easy times but in the hard times too. You taught me too." You taught me to be brave, to take risks, to trust. You taught me that home isn't a place, it's a person. She leaned her head on his shoulder, feeling the steady rhythm of his breathing. I was so scared when I met you. Scared of dying, scared of living, scared of feeling too much. And you just stayed. You stayed and you were patient and you helped me learn that love wasn't something to be afraid of. Are you still scared? Sometimes. I'm scared of losing you, of one of us leaving the other behind, but even that fear is worth it. I would rather have 50 years with you and face that loss than never have known you at all. They sat in silence as the stars came out, one by one, the same stars that had watched over them for 5 decades. Katherine thought about the young woman she had been, boarding a stagecoach in Santa Fe with no idea that her life was about to change completely. If she could go back and tell that frightened girl what was waiting for her, she wouldn't believe it. The love, the life, the fulfillment, all of it would seem too good to be true, but it was true. Every moment of it. Every joy and every sorrow, every challenge and every triumph. It was all real and all worth it. Thank you, Katherine said again, as she had said so many times over the years. For what this time, for staying, for learning, for loving me. She turned to look at him, this man who had been her everything for 50 years. For our whole life together, Dalton, for every single day. He cupped her face in his hands, the gesture as tender now as it had been when they were young. Loving you has been my life's greatest joy, Katherine Preston Foster. My greatest accomplishment. The best thing I ever did was climb down from that horse and choose to stay. And the best thing I ever did was let you. They kissed, soft and sweet, a kiss that held 50 years of history and devotion. When they pulled apart, both were smiling, the future stretched out before them, however much of it they had left. There would be more grandchildren and great-grandchildren. There would be more sunsets and more stories. There would be laughter and tears, gains and losses, all the texture and complexity that makes a life full and meaningful. But whatever came, they would face it together, just as they always had. Two people who had met by chance and stayed by choice. Two people who had learned what love means by living it every single day. Two people who had built something beautiful out of nothing but hope and determination, and the willingness to keep choosing each other, over and over again. As the night deepened and the coyotes began their songs, Katherine and Dalton stood together and walked inside their home, hand in hand as always. The door closed softly behind them, but their story remained, written in the lines of their faces and the strength of their bond and the legacy they had built together. A love story that had started with fear and violence had become something enduring and beautiful. A confession of inexperience had led to a lifetime of learning, and a simple promise to learn what love means together had been kept every day for 50 years. It was exactly the kind of story Katherine would have written if she had dared to imagine such happiness was possible. But she had lived it instead, which was infinitely better. And as they settled into bed that night, wrapped in each other's arms as they had been for half a century, Katherine knew with absolute certainty that this was what she had been searching for all along. Not just love, but this love. Not just courage, but the courage to choose vulnerability. Not just purpose, but the purpose found in building a life with someone who sees all of you and loves you anyway. They had learned what it means together, and it meant everything.